The following events are based on a true story. Names and details have been altered to protect the identities of those involved, but the horror remains untouched. Watch at your own risk. Story 1. I found the first letter tucked under my door on a rainy Monday morning. At first, I thought it was a flyer or some lost neighborly note, but when I opened it, the handwriting was neat. Too neat, and the message short. You look tired today. Maybe sleep earlier next time. No name, no signature, just that single line, and for some reason, it made my stomach turn. I hadn't spoken to anyone that morning. I hadn't even stepped outside. I live on the 12th floor of a high-rise on 5th Avenue, in the middle of everything and yet completely anonymous. Or so I thought. The idea that someone was watching me, closely enough to comment on how I looked at 7 a.m., felt off. Still, I convinced myself it was just a mistake. Maybe a prank. People leave strange things in this city all the time, right? But the next morning there was another letter, this time in a cream envelope, unsealed. You always order a vanilla oat milk latte. Do they ever get your name right? That one made me pause. I stared at the words like they might shift or vanish if I looked long enough. The coffee shop near my office was small, tucked between a dry cleaner and a vape store. Barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. I never posted about it, never mentioned it to anyone. The barista barely looked at me when I ordered, let alone remembered my face. So how did this person know? I crumpled the letter and threw it out, but all morning I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me from across the street. I started scanning the crowd every time I stepped outside. Faces blurred into each other, but sometimes I caught someone pausing just a second too long. A man pretending to tie his shoe. A woman pretending to talk on the phone but never speaking. I told myself I was being paranoid. That big city anxiety had finally sunk its teeth into me. But by Thursday, the third letter arrived. This time, slipped through the tiny gap in my balcony door. You hum that same song every time you brush your teeth. Do you even realize? My heart dropped. My bathroom doesn't have a window. That was the moment it stopped being weird and started being terrifying. I live alone. I lock every door, every night. The balcony is 12 stories up with no access unless you're in my apartment, or Spider-Man. I stood in the middle of my living room, clutching the letter, and just listened. Nothing. No footsteps, no creaks. Just the low hum of the city below and the blood pounding in my ears. I checked every lock, every window. Then I did something I've never done before. I pulled the curtains shut in the middle of the day. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound became a question. Every shift in shadow felt like it meant something. I tried to tell myself it was just a very detailed prank. Someone with too much time and access to my life. Maybe a coworker or a neighbor. But the silence inside my apartment felt too dense, too aware. At one point, I got out of bed and looked through the peephole in my front door. No one was there. But when I turned around, another letter was resting on my kitchen counter. I swear it hadn't been there 5 minutes earlier. I didn't open it right away. I just stared at the envelope, heart hammering, trying to understand how it had gotten there. I hadn't heard the door. I hadn't seen movement. I hadn't even blinked. Eventually, I peeled it open with shaking hands. The message was shorter this time. You left the stove on for 8 minutes before noticing. Be more careful. I sat down on the floor, cold tile against my legs, the walls of my apartment suddenly too close. This wasn't just someone watching. Me. This was someone inside. Someone who had been here. I called the building security. I asked them to check the footage for any unusual activity, but they just looked at me like I was being dramatic. One of them chuckled when I mentioned the letters. People slip flyers under doors all the time, he said, like I hadn't just told him someone was in my apartment without a key. I wanted to scream. Instead, I nodded, thanked him, and went back upstairs. I didn't sleep that night either. Every corner of my apartment felt like it was hiding someone. Every dark shape looked like it could breathe. The next morning, I made a decision. I was going to stay home from work and see if I could catch whoever was doing this. I didn't turn on any lights. I left the TV off. I sat in my bedroom just behind the door, waiting. Hours passed. Nothing. The city moved outside my window. Horns and footsteps and sirens blending into a white noise that felt like a barrier between me and whatever was watching. Just when I started to think maybe I was losing it, I heard the softest click from the living room. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. My heart climbed into my throat. I waited another few seconds, then pushed the door open, slowly, silently, and crept into the hallway. Everything looked the same, but on the floor by the coffee table was another letter. No envelope this time, just a piece of paper folded once, resting exactly where I would see it. I picked it up with trembling fingers. "I see you on your balcony right now." I turned slowly toward the glass door. The curtains were open. I hadn't left them that way. I rushed to the balcony and yanked the door shut, locking it instinctively. My eyes scanned the buildings across the street, every window, every ledge. Nothing. No movement, no one staring back, but I could feel it. Something was wrong. It wasn't just fear anymore, it was certainty. Whoever was doing this wasn't across the street. They had been here, maybe still were. I tore through the apartment, checking under the bed, inside the closets, even behind the shower curtain. But everything was quiet. Too quiet. The kind that presses against your ears like pressure underwater. I haven't received another letter since that day. I wish I could say that means it's over. But now, I lock my bedroom door at night, not just the front. I cover the peephole. I leave lights on in every room, and yet, I still wake up feeling watched. Sometimes things are just slightly out of place. A spoon on the wrong side of the sink. My shoes turned the opposite direction. Small things. Easy to miss. Maybe that's the point. Maybe they're still here, watching, waiting. If you've ever felt like you weren't alone in your own home, you probably weren't. Story 2. I used to think Beverly Hills was the safest place in the world. With manicured lawns, gated driveways, and security cameras on every corner, it felt like nothing bad could really happen here. But now I flinch. Every time the wind shifts the curtains, and I can't sleep unless every light in the house is on. It started 3 weeks ago with a letter, just a plain white envelope left on our doormat at 3:07 a.m. No postage, no name. Just our address in neat, almost mechanical handwriting. Inside was a note typed on old paper that read, "Your son went to bed at 9:43 last night. You stayed up another hour watching that detective show again. You laughed at the joke about the pineapple. It wasn't that funny." At first we laughed it off, thought it was a prank, maybe a bored teenager with too much time on their hands. But the second letter came 2 nights later. It described the argument I had with my wife in the kitchen, word for word. Every bitter sentence, every whisper we thought was private. That was the moment my stomach turned. Whoever was writing these letters wasn't just watching us from outside. They were listening. And not just through a wall or a window. Something about the detail, the tone, made me feel like they were in the house. Or worse, like they had been for a while. We checked the security cameras, of course. Nothing. Just hours of stillness. Then a flicker of static around 3:06 a.m., right before the envelope appeared. No figure, no car, no shadow crossing the driveway. It was as if the letter just materialized out of thin air. I asked our neighbors if they'd seen anything strange, but they just smiled politely and said no. One of them, Mrs. Langford, tilted her head and said, "You know, I always thought your house looked too perfect, like it was hiding something." I laughed at the time. I don't anymore. The third letter included a drawing. Our floor plan, hand-sketched in eerie detail. Every room marked, even the hidden storage space in the hallway closet we thought only the contractor knew about. There were tiny stick figures drawn in each room, labeled with our names. Mine was in the office. My wife, in the bedroom. My son, in his upstairs nook with the skylight. My daughter's crib was circled 3 times in red ink. No message this time. Just that image. I couldn't sleep that night. Every creak felt like a breath against my neck. I moved a chair under the doorknob and sat with a baseball bat until the sun came up. By the fifth letter, my wife stopped pretending. She was okay. She barely spoke during the day and kept the kids close at all times. That one arrived folded inside my morning newspaper, even though we canceled our subscription months ago. It simply said, "You sleep on your left side. Your wife doesn't dream anymore. Your son talks in his sleep and sometimes mentions the name Caleb. You should ask him who that is." We did. He shrugged like it was nothing, said Caleb was his upstairs friend. We don't know anyone named Caleb. I tore the house apart. That day, ripped open vents, checked crawl spaces, even climbed onto the roof. Nothing, no wires, no cameras. No sign that anyone had been in. But that night, I found something in the hallway, pressed flat between two floorboards. A single black and white photo of our house taken from an angle I didn't recognize. We live on a cul-de-sac. That side of the property shouldn't be accessible. But in the picture, a figure was visible in the window. It was my daughter's room, and whoever took the photo. They were standing outside or above. We installed new locks, reinforced the windows. I even paid a guy to sweep the house for bugs. He didn't find anything, but he looked uneasy the whole time. Before he left, he pulled me aside and said, "Whatever this is, it's not coming from outside." I didn't understand what he meant. Not then. That night, I moved my daughter's crib into our bedroom. I thought we'd finally feel safe with everyone close. But around 3:10 a.m., my son started screaming from upstairs. I sprinted up. His bedroom door was wide open. He was pointing to the closet, shaking. He said not to move, he whispered. There was nothing in the closet, just toys and clothes. But on the floor, right at the threshold, was another letter. I hadn't heard the front door. No one had entered. It wasn't there an hour earlier. This one said, "She sleeps better when she's in the middle. You sleep better when you don't check the closet." I didn't understand until I realized my daughter had shifted in her sleep. She had rolled to the center of the bed. I hadn't noticed, and I hadn't checked the closet before lying down. I don't remember falling asleep that night, just waking up, heart racing, drenched in sweat, and the closet door in our room was slightly open. The next day, I called the police. I showed them the letters, the floor plan, the photo. They were polite, professional, but I could see it in their faces. They didn't believe me. There was no forced entry, no fingerprints, no surveillance footage. One officer, trying to be kind, asked if I'd been under a lot of stress lately. Another suggested installing a Ring camera, as if we hadn't already tried that. They took a report and left. That night, there was no letter. For a moment, we felt hopeful. Maybe it was over. Maybe whoever it was got scared off. But then came the sound. Just past 3 a.m., a soft, steady tapping like fingers on glass. I walked the house with a flashlight, checking every window. Nothing, until I reached the kitchen. The sliding glass door to the backyard was fogged over from the cold, but drawn into the condensation, like someone had pressed their fingertip into the glass over and over, was a crude, smiley face. No footsteps in the grass, no signs of entry. Just that damp smile staring back at me. And beneath it, taped to the glass with a piece of medical tape, was a note. "It's warmer in here." We didn't sleep after that. We stayed in the living room, lights on, the kids tucked between us like shields. I kept the bat in my lap. My wife held her phone, ready to call someone, anyone, if we heard a noise. At 3:36 a.m., the power cut out. Just like that. No storm, no warning. Total silence. The kind of silence that presses against your ears. And in that silence, we heard a soft click, then another, like someone opening doors. One by one, coming closer. I whispered for my wife to grab the kids and run, but before she moved, a low voice said from the hallway, "Running won't help. I've already seen everything." When the power came back on, we were alone. No sign of anyone. The house was exactly as we left it, except for one thing. Every mirror had been turned to face the wall. Every single one. even the little one in my daughter's toy set. And on the back of the bathroom mirror, scrawled in something thick and dark, was a single word: closer. We left that morning. Haven't been back since. The house is still listed for sale, though no one seems interested. Sometimes I wonder if the next family will get letters too, or maybe they already have, and just haven't figured it out yet. If you live nearby, check your mirrors, and whatever you do, don't read what's written on the back. Story 3. I used to think I knew every creak in this building, every warped floorboard, every groan of the radiator, every draft that snuck in through the old bricks. That's the kind of intimacy you develop when you live above your own bookstore. For over a decade. But last Thursday, something new slid under my door. It was just after midnight. I was closing up the register when I noticed the corner of an envelope poking in from the hallway. No footsteps, no knock, just silence, and that thin edge of paper like a blade waiting to cut. The paper inside was aged, brittle, like something found in the back of a forgotten archive. The handwriting didn't match any script I recognized. It wasn't cursive. It wasn't block letters. The lines curled in on themselves like the words were trying to hide their own meaning. But the message, somehow, I understood. You lied about the river. She never forgave you. I read it 3 times. I haven't told anyone about what happened by the river. No, one alive knows. I didn't sleep that night. I left the note on the counter and sat at the foot of my bed, staring at the door like it might open on its own. I told myself it had to be a prank. Some weirdo who somehow guessed something close to the truth. But the next night, another envelope appeared. No footsteps again, no sound at all. Just the same brittle paper, the same strange script. This time, the message was even more specific. The mirror in your hallway doesn't show what's behind you. Stop trusting it. I didn't even realize I had started holding my breath until I felt dizzy. By the 3rd note, I was leaving. Lights on all night. I moved a chair in front of the door, which felt ridiculous, but gave me just enough peace of mind to sit still for a few hours. That note came on a Monday. You shouldn't have burned the photographs. He still remembers. He remembers what you did to him. I haven't burned anything in years, not since I was 19, but I knew exactly which photographs it meant. I don't remember falling asleep, but I woke up with the envelope still clutched in my hand. My thumb pressed into the word, remembers, like I had been trying to erase it. I started keeping the notes in a shoebox under the register. Like, hiding them might somehow reduce their power. Customers still came in during the day. Students, tourists, the usual locals, but I couldn't focus. Every time the bell over the door jingled, I flinched. I stopped recommending books. I stopped remembering people's names. It all became noise. Then the 4th note came. It wasn't slipped under the door like the others. It was already inside, nestled between the pages of the collected works of Sylvia Plath, a book no one had touched in weeks. Tonight the lights will flicker. Do not go to the window. What you see won't leave you. That night, around 2:30 a.m., the bulbs above the shop floor buzzed and dimmed in a slow, rhythmic pulse, like breathing. I sat in the dark behind the counter, holding a flashlight I hadn't used in years, too afraid to turn it on. My legs were stiff, my mouth dry. And then I heard it. The unmistakable sound of gravel shifting outside the back door, the alley. Footsteps, just like the note said. Steady, unhurried, coming closer. I told myself not to move, not to look. But some part of me, the part that didn't believe in curses or warnings, made me stand. I stepped toward the back window, slow, careful not to make the old floorboards cry out. The alley was empty. At least that's what it looked like at first. But just as I leaned in, something shifted near the dumpster, too quick to be a person, too tall to be an animal. I blinked, and it was gone. But the feeling it left behind lingered like static in the air. I backed away, heart pounding, and tripped over a stack of boxes. When I hit the ground, I swear I heard a breath, right next to my ear, like someone exhaling into my neck. I didn't go upstairs that night. I stayed on the shop floor with every light on and my back pressed to the front door. When the sun finally rose, I ran outside like I was escaping a fire. I stood there on the sidewalk, staring at the alley entrance, trying to convince myself I imagined everything. Then I saw the newest note, tucked under the windshield wiper. My car. It was the first time I didn't open it right away. I sat in the front seat, note in my lap, hands trembling. When I finally unfolded it, just 3 lines were written. You heard them. Good. They know you now. I didn't go back to the shop that night. I checked into a cheap motel 2 miles away, thinking distance might help. I left my phone on the nightstand, turned off. I didn't even tell anyone where I was going. But when I pulled back the covers, the motel bed, something slid to the floor. Another envelope. My throat closed up. I already knew what it would say. You can change locations. You can change names. But you can't change what you are. The footsteps will find you. I tore it up, flushed the pieces, and sat awake until morning with the TV blaring static. The next day, I returned to the store. Something in me hoped the nightmare had just burned itself out, that the notes would stop if I stopped reacting. But the moment I stepped inside, I felt it. Heavier air like walking underwater. The bell above the door rang twice, even though I was the only one who entered. I checked the mailbox behind the counter. Empty. But when I looked up, every book on the front shelf, every single one, had been turned backward, their spines hidden, their pages facing out. And in the center, sitting upright on the display table, was a single envelope. I opened the envelope with numb fingers. This time, the paper wasn't brittle. It was damp. The ink bled slightly at the edges, like the message had been weeping. Tonight, you will hear footsteps in the alley, outside your shop. You will try to ignore them, but they will get closer. You will never be alone again. I stood there for a long time, note in hand, watching the daylight slowly fade through the front windows. I told myself I wouldn't wait for it. I told myself I'd leave before the sun went down. But when dusk settled, I was still there, sitting, waiting. It's past midnight now. The shop is silent, but I can hear the gravel shifting behind the building. Just like before. Closer this time. I haven't looked. I won't. The back door is locked, but I don't think that matters anymore. There's a pressure in the air, like something is pressing against the walls, like it's already inside. If someone finds this, if anyone reads it, don't come looking for me. Don't come here at night, because the last thing the note said wasn't meant as a warning. It was a fact. I will never be alone again. Story 4. I used to think I was careful, meticulous even. I had alarms on every door, facial recognition on my devices, and an encrypted VPN running 24/7. That's the irony, I guess. You build a fortress around yourself and never stop to wonder if the threat was already inside. The first letter arrived 3 weeks after I moved into the penthouse on California Street. No envelope, just a folded sheet of paper slipped neatly through the mail slot. I thought it was a flyer, or maybe a welcome note from the building's concierge. But when I opened, my stomach clenched. It listed everything I had done the previous Thursday. Lunch at Café de la Presse at 12:17 p.m., a quick stop at Walgreens at 1:42, and a conversation with my co-founder Ben verbatim, including the part where I jokingly said I'd sell my soul for a few more users. At first, I told myself it was a prank. Maybe Ben was messing with me, or someone on the team hacked into my calendar and transcripts. But the precision was too sharp, the language too intimate. Whoever wrote it knew not just where I was, they knew how I felt. The letter mentioned how I hesitated before replying to Ben, the way I glanced at the reflection in the cafe window when I thought someone was watching me. It said, "You looked tired when you said that. Not physically, just tired of pretending." I never said that out loud. I never told anyone that. I didn't tell anyone. I don't know why. Maybe part of me didn't want to give it power. Or maybe I didn't want to sound paranoid. In the world I come from, startups, investors, the endless grind, people who show cracks don't get second meetings. I threw the letter out and convinced myself it was just someone with too much time and access to a few online calendars. But then, the second one came. This time, it was left under my door, folded the same way. No fingerprints, no smudges, just clean, deliberate paper. It described my Sunday morning, the walk I took down to Huntington Park, the bench I sat on, the call I made to my mom, word for word. The letter even mentioned what I wore: gray hoodie, black leggings, sunglasses you keep adjusting like you're trying to hide behind them. I started locking my door more often. I covered the peephole with tape. I turned my phone off at night and started leaving my laptop in the closet, wrapped in a towel. I even unplugged my smart speaker. But the letters kept coming. Always once a week, always too specific. I moved my car to different floors of the garage just to test a theory. And sure enough, the next letter noted, Tuesday P3, 4th spot from the elevator, 9:12 p.m. arrival. You dropped your keys before you reached the door. I hadn't told anyone. No cameras caught it, and still they knew. By the 5th letter, I stopped pretending this was just someone messing with me. It wasn't a hacker. It wasn't a prank. It felt personal. I started watching people in the lobby more closely. Residents, delivery drivers, even the doorman. Every face became a suspect. I caught myself staring too long at strangers on the street, trying to guess if they were the ones watching me. But how could they be? How could anyone have seen all of it without me noticing? Unless they were already inside. That thought kept me up for nights, wondering if someone had access to the penthouse, to my devices, maybe even to me. Then came the letter that changed everything. It arrived on a Wednesday afternoon, not the usual day. I found it when I came back from a late lunch, sitting on my kitchen counter. Not the floor, not the hallway, the counter. My heart stopped. I didn't scream, I didn't move, I just stood there staring at it. Same fold, same handwriting, but this one was short. Just one line. We are closer than you think. I remember backing out of the apartment slowly, trying not to breathe too loud. I went down the stairs instead of taking the elevator. I walked 2 miles before I stopped and called Ben. He told me to call the cops. I didn't. I didn't call the police. Because what would I even say? That someone was stalking me with a pen and paper? That they knew what I said, where I went, how? I felt, without ever showing their face, I knew how it would sound, and honestly, a part of me didn't want confirmation that this was real. I went to stay in a hotel that night, one of those sterile, business-class places with no personality and no history. I picked it because it felt anonymous. I didn't use my name to book it, I paid in cash. I turned off all location services. But when I opened the hotel room door the next morning, there was a letter on the floor, waiting. I couldn't breathe. I just stood there in the doorway, unable to cross the threshold. It felt like the floor had dropped out beneath me. I finally picked it up with the sleeve of my hoodie and opened it with shaking hands. It was calm, almost gentle in tone. You don't need to run. We're not chasing. We're just watching. That was the first time I cried. Not because of what the letter said, but because of what it didn't. There was no demand, no threat, no explanation. Just presence. Constant, quiet, and close. It was like they weren't trying to hurt me. They just wanted me to know they were, always there. I moved out of the penthouse 2 days later. I left most of my things behind, furniture, electronics, even clothes. Something about taking anything with me felt wrong, like I'd be carrying a thread of whatever this was into my next space. I found a short-term rental in Soma, something small and unremarkable. I didn't tell anyone the address, not even Ben. I used burner phones, wiped my laptop, stopped posting anything online. For a while, it was quiet. No letters, no signs, just silence. I started to believe maybe I'd shaken them, whoever they were. Then, exactly 1 week later, the silence broke. I woke up to a soft scratching sound near the door. When I opened it, there was no one there. But the letter was. No envelope, no stamps. Just the same folded paper centered neatly on the welcome mat. My hands trembled as I opened it, already dreading what I might read. But this one wasn't a list. It was a countdown. 7 days, 6:03 p.m., we'll be there. That was all it said. I checked the date and time twice. Then again, they weren't just watching anymore, they were planning something. Something with a time stamp. I didn't go to work that day. I didn't go anywhere. I sat in the middle of the apartment, phone off, no lights on, a knife clutched in one hand and my back to the wall. Every sound made me flinch, every minute felt like an hour. At exactly 6:03 p.m. there was a knock. Not loud, not aggressive, just intentional. 3 soft knocks. I didn't move, I didn't speak. I just stared at the door, my breath caught in my throat, waiting for something, anything, to happen. But nothing did. No footsteps walking away. No second knock. Just silence. Eventually, I found the courage to open the door. There was no one there. Just another letter, folded the same way, placed exactly where the others had been. I opened it with shaking hands. But this time, the message was different. It didn't describe what I had done. It didn't warn me. It simply said, "You've been seen, you've been chosen, this was only the beginning." That was 3 nights ago. I haven't slept since. I keep checking the locks, covering the mirrors, unplugging everything. But somehow, I still feel them watching, waiting. I don't know what's coming next, but if anyone reading this has ever gotten a letter like mine, please tell me. I need to know I'm not alone. Story 5. I found the first letter on a rainy Tuesday morning, folded neatly and placed right on our doormat. No envelope, no name, just damp from the mist. At first I thought it was some neighborhood flyer or maybe one of those passive-aggressive notes from the HOA. But when I opened it, my hands started to tremble. It described our weekend at Cape Cod with alarming precision. The creaky old inn with sea blue shutters. The name of the waitress who served us clam chowder. Even the argument David and I had in the parking lot behind the antique store. No one had been near us, at least no one we noticed. David tried to laugh it off at first, said it was probably some weird coincidence. Maybe the inn had security cameras, or maybe someone we knew had followed us for a joke. But I could tell it unsettled him too. That night he double-locked the doors without saying anything. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the line at the end of the letter. You looked happiest when you thought no one was watching. But I was. I stared at our bedroom window until sunrise, wondering if someone had been standing right outside it, watching us breathe. The second letter came 3 days later. This time, it was waiting on our kitchen counter. We don't know how it got there. I'm obsessive about locking doors and windows, always have been, but somehow someone had gotten inside without triggering the alarm. The letter described our drive back from the Cape in chilling detail. The exact route we took. The stop at that rundown gas station with the flickering neon sign. Even the song David was humming under his breath while I dozed off in the passenger seat. My stomach turned when I realized I hadn't told anyone about that drive. Not even in passing. David tore the letter in half and stormed outside, muttering about installing cameras. But I could see something else behind his anger. Fear. That night, the air in the house felt heavier, like the walls were holding their breath. I thought I saw a shadow move just past the hallway while brushing my teeth. But when I turned, there was nothing. I didn't mention it to David. He already looked like he hadn't slept in days, eyes constantly flicking toward the windows like he expected someone to be there, watching. By the end of the week, we stopped pretending this was a prank. I woke up one night around 3:40 a.m. to the unmistakable sound of footsteps upstairs. Slow, deliberate, except our bedroom is upstairs. I lay frozen in bed, straining my ears. The sound stopped just outside our door. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. After what felt like an hour, I finally worked up the nerve to wake David. He sat up instantly, like he'd been awake too. We searched the house top to bottom but found nothing. No broken locks, no open windows, no signs of forced entry. Just silence and the faint smell of something sweet and rotting in the hallway. The letters kept coming, but now they were typed, neatly formatted, printed on crisp white paper. Each one described things we hadn't done yet, places we were planning to go, conversations we hadn't had. It was like whoever this was could see into our thoughts. Or worse, like they were already inside our home, listening. David started, keeping the lights on at night. I noticed he stopped changing clothes in the bedroom. He said it was because he felt like he was being watched. I wanted to tell him I'd started feeling the same way, but I couldn't bring myself to say it out loud, saying it would make it real. Then the letters stopped. For 5 whole days, nothing, no pages, no new shadows, just silence. You'd think that would be a relief, but it wasn't. The quiet felt staged, like someone was holding their breath, waiting. I caught myself checking the mailbox 5 or 6 times a day. Not because I wanted another letter, but because not getting one felt even worse. On the 6th night, I walked past the bathroom and stopped cold. There was writing on the mirror, traced through the steam even though no one had showered that night. 4 words, "You'll never escape." David scrubbed the mirror so hard he cracked the glass. We slept in the living room that night, with the TV on and every light blazing. Around 2 a.m., the screen suddenly went black, followed by a sharp, high-pitched noise like feedback from a microphone. We yanked the power cord from the wall, but the noise kept going for another full minute. I swear, it sounded like a voice underneath the static, something whispering too fast to understand. When it finally stopped, David sat back on the couch, pale and shaking. "We need to leave," he said. "We need to leave now." We packed the next morning. No plan, no destination. Just threw clothes into bags and grabbed anything that didn't need to be unplugged. But when David turned the key in the ignition, nothing happened. The engine didn't even try to turn over, just dead silence. He checked the battery, the cables, everything. Nothing was wrong, at least nothing obvious. We called for a tow truck, but the call didn't go through. No signal. I tried the landline, but it only played static. Except, beneath it, I swear I heard my own voice whispering something I couldn't quite catch. I dropped the receiver. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. We gave up and went back inside to regroup, only to find all the lights in the house flickering in sync, rhythmically, like a pulse. Then, the hallway light blew out with a sharp pop. The air was heavy with that same sickly sweet smell from before. I turned to David to ask if he smelled it too, but he was just staring past me, his eyes wide and unfocused. "Don't move," he whispered. "Someone's standing behind you." I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I just closed my eyes and listened. There was no sound, but I felt the weight of something right there, close, breathing. We never saw anyone. When I finally turned around, the hallway was empty. But something was different. The framed photos on the wall had all been turned face down. Every single one. We didn't hear it happen. We didn't see it. They were just that way. We stayed, up until morning, too afraid to sleep. As soon as the sun rose, we got into David's car again. This time it started. No problems. Like nothing had happened. We drove to a hotel an hour away and tried to convince ourselves that it was over, that whatever it was hadn't followed us. For a while, we even believed it. It's been 2 weeks since then. No more letters, no strange sounds, no shadows, just quiet. But this morning I went to brush my teeth and there it was, on the bathroom mirror of the hotel room. The same handwriting, the same 4 words. "You'll never escape." I haven't told David yet. I'm not sure I will, because deep down I think I finally understand. This thing, whatever it is, it's not tied to the house. It's tied to us. And if you're reading this, maybe it's already watching you too. The following events are based on a true story. Names and details have been altered to protect the identities of those involved, but the horror remains untouched. Watch at your own risk. Story 6. I used to feel safe in a crowd. There's a certain comfort in anonymity. Walking through the chaos of DC, just another face, another suit in a sea of thousands. That illusion shattered the day I received the first letter. It was a plain white envelope, no return address, tucked into my office mailbox like any other piece of correspondence. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed in a sterile, emotionless font. You laughed too hard at Mark's joke. He didn't even think it was funny. That was it. No name, no signature. Just that one sentence. Mark is my co-worker. He had cracked a dumb joke at our Monday editorial meeting. I remember laughing, yeah, but it wasn't that funny. I showed it to him, half joking, thinking someone in the office was pulling a prank. Mark shrugged it off, probably assuming the same. I tossed the letter in my drawer and forgot about it. Until 3 days later, another envelope appeared. This time it said, "You should stop ordering the grilled cheese at Bar Louie. You always regret it." That's what I had for lunch the day before, alone, at a cafe 2 blocks from the office. I hadn't told anyone. No social media posts, no receipt left behind, nothing. That's when something cold settled in my chest. I looked. Around the newsroom, suddenly hyper-aware of every eye, every idle glance. It could have been anyone. I tried to be rational. Maybe it was someone I passed on the street. Someone who recognized me from the news segments I'd done. As a journalist, I wasn't exactly famous, but my face had been on TV enough times that a stranger might recognize me. Still, that didn't explain the specificity. These weren't just casual observations, they were intimate, like the writer wasn't watching from a distance but sitting beside me. I started double-checking my surroundings, looking over my shoulder, watching the reflections in windows as I walked by, and still, the letters kept coming. Each one more detailed, more invasive. One mentioned my daughter's name and what she wore to school that morning. Another described the exact conversation I had with my wife over dinner, including the part where we argued about which movie to watch. I never saw anyone near the house, never noticed a car parked too long on the street. But the letters kept arriving, always without postage, always slipped into places no one should have had access to. My desk drawer, my gym locker, once even the inside of my car on the driver's seat. That one shook me the most. I had locked the doors. I was sure of it. I went to the police, brought them a stack of the letters, all neatly folded and stored, in a file I'd started keeping. The officer at the desk listened politely, skimmed a few, and said he'd file a report. But there was no threat in the letters, nothing overtly criminal, just observations. Accurate, unnerving, but not illegal. He suggested I might have a secret admirer. I laughed, too loudly, too forced, and left the station feeling more exposed than ever. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing someone standing just outside my bedroom window, silently writing down everything they saw. A few days later, I started noticing something new. A presence. I don't know how else to describe it. The feeling that someone was close, just out of sight. I'd walk past alleyways and feel eyes on me. I'd sit at a cafe and get the sense that someone was watching from across the street. Once I swore I heard someone whisper my name as I unlocked my front door, but when I turned, the street was empty. My wife told me I was just stressed, that maybe all the news coverage and late hours were catching up to me, but I could see it in her eyes. She was starting to worry too. Then came the letter that changed everything. It was waiting for me inside, my coat pocket at work, something I never left unattended. The note read, "I know what you're doing tonight. You're going to try the new Thai place on 14th. Don't. The green curry's not worth it." My plans hadn't been shared with anyone. I'd only decided on the restaurant that morning, in my head, while shaving. My hand started shaking as I read it. I checked the pocket again, looking for some rational explanation. Maybe someone was messing with me, tracking my phone, bugging my apartment. But deep down I knew this wasn't that simple. I canceled dinner and stayed home, locked every window, drew every curtain. I kept the lights off and sat in silence, just listening. At around 9:17 p.m., there was a knock at the door. 2 slow, deliberate taps. Not urgent, not random, just intentional. I froze, heart pounding so loudly I thought whoever was outside might hear it. I crept to the peephole, but the porch was empty. No footsteps, no car pulling away. Just the soft hum of the city and my own pulse in my ears. When I finally opened the door, there was nothing there. except a fresh white envelope on the doormat. I didn't open the letter right away. I couldn't. Just seeing it made my stomach twist. I left it on the coffee table and stared at it, for hours like it might move on its own. When I finally unfolded the page, my hands were slick with sweat. The message was shorter than usual, just 6 words. I like how fear looks on you. I dropped it, backed away from it like it might bite. That was when I knew this wasn't just someone watching me. They were enjoying it, feeding off it. My fear wasn't a byproduct. It was the point. I started losing time. I'd blink and find myself standing in rooms I didn't remember walking into. I'd get in my car and forget where I was headed. I stopped going to work. I told my editor I needed time off for family matters, but I think he could hear the panic in my voice. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I dreamed of letters. Hundreds of them fluttering down from the ceiling like ash, and behind them, always a face I couldn't quite see. Just the impression of a grin too wide, too patient. Last night, I tried something desperate. I booked a last-minute room at a hotel across town, paid in cash, didn't tell anyone. I left my phone at home, used a burner I bought from a corner store. No one could have known where I was, not even my wife. I sat in that dim, musty room, convinced I'd finally slipped through the cracks. For a few hours, it worked. I felt visible again, untouched, until I opened the nightstand drawer looking for a Bible and found a white envelope instead. No address, no stamp. Just one line. "Why are you hiding from me, Andrew?" That was 6 hours ago. I haven't left the room since. I don't know how they found me, or how they always seem 2 steps ahead. I've unplugged the phone, covered the peephole, stuffed towels under the door. Still, I feel it. The presence. Like someone sitting on the other side of the wall, waiting, watching. I don't know if this story will even make it out. I just needed to write it down, to prove I'm not losing my mind. If you're reading this, tell me you felt, too, that sense that someone's always there, closer than they should be. Story 7. I always thought Santa Monica was safe. That's part of why I moved here in the first place. Sunshine, yoga, organic markets, the whole cliché. But last week I found a letter tucked under my apartment door, and since then I haven't slept a full night. It wasn't threatening, not exactly. Just detailed. Too detailed. It mentioned the name of my yoga studio on Main Street and the exact green juice I bought after class. I thought maybe it was a prank, but then it listed the time I left the beach. 6:42 p.m. You seemed relaxed, and the way I paused by the railing to check my phone. No one should know that. No one. The second letter came 2 days later, and it was worse. It referenced a conversation I had with my friend Marcy inside my apartment. No windows open, no phone nearby. Just the 2 of us talking about how we both felt like someone had been watching us lately. I don't even remember saying it out loud. But there it was in the letter. "You're right to be paranoid, you're not imagining it." I reread that sentence until my hands started shaking. Whoever this is, they're not just following me, they're listening. Somehow. I started changing my routine after that. No more yoga classes at the same hour. I skipped the beach entirely. I even stopped seeing Marcy for a while, just in case. But the third letter arrived anyway. This time it was already inside my apartment when I got home. No envelope, no stamp, just folded neatly on the middle of my kitchen table like it had always belonged there. "Nice try," it said at the top. "But patterns are hard to break. You still brush your teeth with your right hand. You still check your locks twice before bed." I dropped the letter and ran to the door, heart hammering in my chest. Everything was locked. Still, someone had been here. That night I slept with the lights on. Every creak in the walls made my skin crawl. I tried calling the police the next morning, but without any real threat. They couldn't do much. "Maybe it's a friend playing a joke," the officer said. I wanted to scream. None of my friends knew about how I cried in the shower after reading that letter, or how I started leaving. My TV on just to drown out the silence. It's not a joke, it's someone watching me all the time. and they want me to know it. It was the fourth letter that changed everything. No more observations, no passive-aggressive tone. Just one line, handwritten in rushed, uneven ink. Don't take the usual route home today. That was it. No name, no signature, no explanation. I stared at it for what felt like hours. Was it a threat? A warning? I didn't know what scared me more, that someone was tracking me so closely, or that I was now relying on them to stay safe. That day, I left work early, took the most crowded streets I could find, ducked into shops I didn't need to visit. But even with all that, I felt it. Someone was following me. I didn't see anyone, but I felt it. When I got home, my apartment felt colder than usual. Not temperature-wise, something else. Like the warmth had been pulled out of the space. I checked the closets, the shower, under the bed. Everything looked untouched. But when I opened my laptop, the webcam light blinked once before going dark. It had never done that before. I slammed it shut, heart pounding, hands clammy. And then I saw it, taped to the back of my bedroom door. A fifth letter, smaller than the others, folded into a perfect square. I already knew it would be worse. The letter was brief, but it made my blood run cold. It read, "There's someone standing behind you right now." I didn't even have to think about it. I jumped up from the bed and spun around. Nothing, no one. My heart felt like it was beating in my throat. I stared at the empty corner of my room, willing myself to believe it was a sick joke, but the coldness in the air told me otherwise. I don't know why, but I immediately checked the window locks. They were all secure. I went to the door, checked that too, secure. But then, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The curtain was slightly swaying, just enough to show that someone had been there. It wasn't the wind. I spent the entire night awake, trying to rationalize everything, but nothing made sense. I kept thinking, maybe I'm just paranoid. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The next morning, I decided to take a different route to work. No more shortcuts, no more familiar streets. But as I turned the corner near my usual bus stop, I saw a figure standing across the street, just watching me. The figure was cloaked, in shadow, barely visible. But I knew it was someone I didn't recognize. I froze. I didn't know if they could see me or if they were just another part of my own growing madness. I ducked into a coffee shop and pretended to be on my phone, peeking through the window every few seconds. The figure hadn't moved, just standing there, head slightly tilted like they were listening to something I couldn't hear. I waited, nearly 20 minutes before finally stepping out, keeping my head down and walking fast. I didn't look back. I couldn't. That night, I tore my apartment apart, checked the vents, the outlets, every drawer, every crevice. I even unscrewed the cover of my smoke detector. Nothing. But still, I didn't feel alone. I started thinking maybe that was the point. Maybe whoever this is doesn't want to hurt me. Not yet. Maybe they just want me to know they can. I didn't. Receive another letter for 3 days. I started to think it was over. I even let myself believe just for a second that maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. But on the fourth night, I came home to find my front door slightly ajar. Just an inch. I knew I hadn't left it like that. I stood in the hallway for a long time, too scared to breathe, let alone move. When I finally pushed the door open, everything inside looked normal, except for a single piece of paper placed carefully on my pillow. No envelope this time, no handwriting. Just a printed message in bold black letters. You missed it. I don't know what I missed. I've replayed every second of that day in my head, over and over. Did someone break in? Did they watch me sleep? Did I pass them on the street without realizing it? I've stopped going to work. I barely eat. My phone rings and I don't answer. I unplugged my router, covered every camera lens I could find, taped over the peephole. But nothing stops the feeling that I'm being watched. Not even now. Especially not now. Every reflection feels off. Every sound seems a little too deliberate. And sometimes, just before I fall asleep, I hear it. The faint click of a camera shutter. Tonight I found one last letter in my fridge. I don't know how it got there. I hadn't opened the door all day. It wasn't addressed to me. It just... "Do you never saw him? But he was always there. I dropped it, closed the fridge, and locked myself in the bathroom. That's where I'm writing this from. My back is against the wall and I haven't blinked in minutes. Because a few moments ago, I looked into the hallway mirror, and for just a split second, I swear I saw someone standing behind me. But when I turned around, nothing. If you've ever felt like someone was watching you and dismissed it, don't. I did. And now I think it's too late. The following events are based on a true story. Names and details have been altered to protect the identities of those involved. But the horror remains untouched. Watch at your own risk. Story 8. I used to think paranoia was just a side effect of sleepless nights and too much caffeine. But lately I've started double locking the windows in my apartment, even the ones on the 3rd floor. I live alone in a loft near the South Loop, and ever since that gallery opening on Michigan Avenue, something's been off. The kind of off that crawls into your bones when no one's around, but you still feel like you're being watched. The night of the event, everything felt electric. Flashes of cameras, wine glasses clinking, voices echoing under vaulted ceilings. I was there to showcase a few street photography pieces, nothing out of the ordinary, until I got the first letter. It was waiting on my doorstep the next morning. No return address, no stamp, just folded neatly into a black envelope sealed, like something out of a noir film. At first I thought it was from someone I met at the event, maybe a client or a model trying to be mysterious. But when I unfolded the thick parchment inside, the tone was strange. It started by complimenting my work, mentioning details only someone familiar with my portfolio would know. Then it shifted, subtly, but enough to make my fingers tighten. Around the paper, the letter referenced a conversation I'd had in private with a model by the wine bar. Conversation no one else had been close enough to hear. I told myself it was a coincidence. Maybe someone overheard and I didn't notice. Maybe the gallery had cameras, but that didn't explain the next letter. It came 3 days later, slipped, under my door sometime between 2 and 4 a.m. I know because I had a habit of pacing at night, and it hadn't been there at 2. This one was more specific. It listed the artists I'd spoken to and even mentioned the exact expression I had when I viewed a particular black and white portrait. You tilted your head slightly, it said. Your eyes narrowed, confused but intrigued. That's when it started to feel personal, intimate, like whoever was writing to me had been standing right next to me the whole night, breathing the same air. I started paying more attention to my surroundings. I stopped walking home the same way twice. I deleted all my social media accounts and switched to a burner phone. Still, the letters kept coming. One described the alley behind the gallery where I sometimes went to clear my head. I never told anyone about that place. It wasn't on any map or social feed. It was just a quiet, dead-end strip with rusted fire escapes and a broken lamp that flickered above a dumpster. That letter described the exact pattern of the graffiti on the brick wall and the way my shadow stretched across the concrete as I smoked. I hadn't even taken a photo there. I couldn't understand how anyone could have known, unless someone was already there, waiting. It all escalated the night I found a letter inside my apartment. Not under the door, not slid through the mail slot, inside. I came home around midnight after wandering the city, trying to distract myself, only to find the envelope on my kitchen counter. I stood frozen in the doorway for what felt like a full minute, my keys still in hand. I hadn't left the window open. Nothing was broken. The lock hadn't been tampered with. But someone had been there. The letter didn't bother with pleasantries, this time. You looked tired tonight, it began. You walked past the fountain on Wabash without stopping. Your left shoelace came undone, but you didn't notice. I remember that shoelace. I remember nearly tripping. That's when I stopped sleeping. I couldn't. Every sound became a possible intruder. Pipes expanding, the elevator whining, a pigeon landing too hard on the windowsill. All of it kept me on edge. The letters didn't stop. One of them came with a photograph of me, taken from behind. From a distance, but clearly at the exact moment I had snapped a shot of the river at dusk. My hand was midair, just pressing the shutter. The angle wasn't one I could trace to anyone nearby that day. No tourists, no reflection in the windows. Just me, alone, or at least I thought I was. I finally told someone, a friend of mine named Mara, another photographer, someone I trusted. She listened, half concerned, half skeptical, the way you'd expect someone to react when your story starts, sounding like a conspiracy theory. I showed her the letters, the photo. She flipped through them slowly, her brows knitting tighter the further she read. "This isn't normal," she said quietly, finally. "But maybe it's just some obsessed someone trying to get inside your head." I wanted to believe that, I really did. But a fan doesn't break into your home. A fan doesn't know that you keep your lenses in the second drawer of your desk. A fan doesn't write, "You will lose your camera tomorrow at 8:47 p.m. The alley will be empty, but it won't feel that way." That letter arrived on a Thursday. I remember because I stared at it for hours, wondering if I should even leave the apartment the next day. I almost didn't. But by late afternoon, the rational part of my brain started clawing back, telling me it was ridiculous to let some anonymous creep control my movements. I packed my gear and left for a shoot near the river, the same route I always took, looping around the back of the gallery before heading north. The alley was empty, of course it was. Just concrete, trash bins, the same flickering light. But something about the air felt heavier, like the silence was too intentional. I hesitated before walking through, gripping my camera tight. I made it halfway when my phone buzzed. One new message, no number, just the words, "Now." I spun around instinctively, but the alley was still empty. Nothing moved, no footsteps, no voices. But in that second, something brushed past my shoulder, barely a whisper of contact, like wind shifting the wrong direction. I stumbled back, heart pounding, and that's when I realized my camera strap felt light. Too light. I looked down. The camera was gone. It had been clipped off clean without me even noticing. My hands were shaking as I backed up against the wall, eyes scanning every inch of the alley. There was no one there. Not a shadow, not a footstep. But somehow, someone had taken it. At 8:47 p.m., just like the letter said. I filed a police report that night. But I didn't tell them about the letters. I knew how it would sound. They took down my statement, nodded politely, and told me to be careful. That was it. No follow-up, no patrol, just a shrug and a case number. Mara stopped replying to my messages after I forwarded her the last letter, the one that came 2 days after the theft. It simply read, "You should have listened, but now you're part of it." I don't know what that means. I've read those words 100 times, trying to find something hidden in the phrasing, some code or logic. But there's nothing, just that sentence printed neatly like all the others, like whoever is behind this wants me to keep reading, wants me to wait for the next one. I haven't taken a photograph since. Every time I lift a camera, or even my phone, I feel exposed, like I'm opening a door for something to step through. My apartment doesn't feel like mine anymore. I've changed the locks. I've covered the windows. I've even started sleeping in the living room, away from the bedroom where I found the last envelope. It was taped to the inside of my closet. Inside, not delivered, not placed, taped like someone had taken their time. It didn't say much, just a single line. "There's nothing left to steal." I still don't know what that means. My equipment, my privacy, my mind. Sometimes I wonder if I've already gone too far down this hole. If this was never about the letters, or the photos, or the gallery, maybe it's always been about me, my reactions, my fear. Maybe that's what they've been watching this whole time. Not what I do, but how I fall apart. And if that's true, if someone is still out there, still keeping track, then I have to ask, what happens next? If you've read this and something feels familiar, if you've ever felt eyes on you when no one's around, please say something. I need to know I'm not the only one. Story 9. I never thought a piece of paper could make my hands shake. But there I was, standing in my apartment in downtown LA, staring at the fourth handwritten letter in 2 weeks. At first I assumed it was just some overly passionate fan, someone who'd seen one of my short films online and decided to be creepy in a vaguely flattering way. The first note had even made me smile. "You're going to make something great soon. Don't give." But now this one knew things. It referenced a conversation I had over lunch with my agent yesterday, word for word. A conversation that took place in a closed booth, in a restaurant with no one nearby. My building isn't easy to get into. You need a key card for the elevator, and the front desk doesn't let people up without a name and ID. So how did this letter end up on my welcome mat, less than 3 hours after a meeting I hadn't even told my assistant about? Worse, whoever wrote it knew exactly what happened in that meeting. They'll use the word promising but suggest more development. Check your inbox around 7 p.m. That's exactly what the email said. Same wording. Same dismissive tone. I read the line again and again, feeling something tighten in my chest. Someone was watching me, not just in public, but close enough to hear every word. I started leaving my curtains closed even during the day. Downtown LA was always loud, sirens shouting, the occasional tourist yelling at Spider-Man on Hollywood Boulevard. But now, even silence made me uneasy. The letters kept arriving. Always handwritten, always unmarked. And they escalated. One mentioned the scar on my left ankle, something I got as a kid in Michigan long before I moved west. Another referenced the man I was casually seeing, calling him by a pet name I never used in public. The worst part? I hadn't even told him I loved him yet, but the letter knew. You're falling for him, but he won't be enough when it starts. I tried brushing it off as a stalker. That made it easier to explain, to myself, to friends. Just a deeply messed up person with too much time and access. But no matter how many locks I changed, routes I altered, or burner phones I bought, the letters kept coming. No postmark, no sign of forced entry. They just appeared. On my car seat, inside my freezer. Once tucked between pages of a script I hadn't opened in weeks. That one simply said, "This scene won't make the cut. You'll fight for it. Anyway." And I did. 2 days later, the director cut it during a call. I started recording myself at night. Not for safety, though maybe it should have been, but to prove I wasn't losing my mind. There were too many details in those letters. Things I didn't even remember until I played them back, like the exact phrase I used while pacing my kitchen, ranting to no one about my stalled career. I'm just screaming into the void, and the void's not even echoing back. That line showed up the next morning, scribbled on the back of a Ralph's receipt. Same handwriting, same pen, no envelope. Just sitting there on my bathroom counter as if it belonged. Then came the studio meeting, the big one, a chance I'd been chasing for years. I didn't tell anyone, not my agent, not my boyfriend, not even my therapist. It was my way of taking control again, of keeping something for myself. The meeting went well, surprisingly. The producer nodded a lot, even laughed once, but I couldn't shake the nausea curling in my stomach. It wasn't nerves, it was dread. And when I got home, there it was. A letter on the doormat, waiting like a patient dog. It read, "The meeting went fine, but the rejection will come at 7:04. Don't let it break you. That's not the worst thing you'll experience today." At exactly 7:04 p.m., my phone buzzed. The subject line read, "Appreciate the submission." I didn't need to open it, I already knew what it said. I sat frozen on the couch, watching the unread notification glow against the darkness of my living room. I hadn't turned the lights on yet. Couldn't. Something about the silence, the dusk, made everything feel suspended in amber. The letter lay on the coffee table in front of me, as if mocking me. My chest tightened. Not from the rejection, but from the last line. That threat, that promise. The worst thing is still coming. The phone rang, no caller ID. I let it ring once, twice, then grabbed it on the third. I didn't speak. Neither did the voice on the other end. But I heard breathing, calm, deliberate, close, like someone whispering behind their hand. Then a low voice said, "You left the window open." I stood up so fast I nearly tripped over the coffee table. My apartment was only 5 floors up, but I hadn't opened a window in days. Not since the letters started. I walked slowly to the bedroom, pulse thudding in my ears, and there it was. The window was cracked open just 2 inches. I slammed the window shut and locked it, but the damage was already done. I checked every room in my apartment, every closet, under the bed, behind the shower curtain. Nothing. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was already too late, that someone had already been here. The apartment felt touched, like someone had rearranged the air. I started snapping photos of everything, just to track it all. Drawer positions, the angle of my laptop screen, the level of water in the kettle. I needed evidence, proof that I wasn't unraveling. But that night I found a new letter. It was already inside my phone case. I hadn't noticed it until I plugged the phone in, a small fold of paper pressed flat behind the clear plastic. I slid it out with shaking fingers. It simply said, "Stop looking for the how. Start thinking about the why." I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I sat up in bed with every light on, laptop open, searching for anyone online who might have gone through something similar. Stalker forums, Reddit threads, surveillance tech subreddits. But the more I searched, the less I found. No story matched mine. No one knew anything about letters that predicted your life like a script someone else had already read. At dawn, I finally stood up from the couch and walked to the door, unsure of what I was even hoping to find. But there was nothing outside, no shadow in the hallway, no note on the floor, just quiet. I sat back down telling myself that maybe it was over. Maybe I'd reached the peak of whatever this was. At 9:12 a.m., I got a text from my boyfriend. "Hey, I stopped by, but you weren't home. Everything okay?" I hadn't left. I hadn't heard a knock. But when I looked at the deadbolt, it was unlocked. I always locked it. Always. I moved out a week later. Left the city, the job, the apartment, everything. But last night, in the mailbox of my new place, there was another letter. No stamp, no name. Just one line. "You can move anywhere, Tara. That doesn't mean you're alone." I haven't slept since. I don't know who's writing these. I don't know what they want, but I've stopped trying to understand. Now I just keep the lights on and check the locks twice. If any of you have gone through something like this, if you've ever felt watched when no one's there, please, tell me in the comments. I need to know I'm not the only one. Story 10. I used to be one of those guys who laughed at conspiracy theories. VPNs, encrypted chats, burner phones. Sure, I knew all that, but I never thought I'd need them. I wrote an article about data privacy last month for an online publication. It wasn't groundbreaking, just a mix of warnings, tips, and a few scary stats. But ever since it went live, I've been getting these letters. Real paper letters. No return address. Neatly typed. They come every few days, always folded once, always with details that make my stomach turn. The first one seemed like a prank. It listed the last 5 websites I'd visited that day, including one I checked at 3:12 a.m., half asleep in bed. It even mentioned the name of the video I watched. Something random and embarrassing. I laughed it off, assumed someone hacked my browser history, maybe a friend messing with me. But when the second letter came, it quoted a private message I sent to my ex, one I never told anyone about, one that wasn't even in my inbox anymore. By the third letter, I stopped laughing. It arrived on a Tuesday morning, slid halfway under my apartment door like a quiet threat. This one listed the times I had logged, in and out of my social media accounts over the past weekend, down to the minute. It even mentioned a DM I had typed out but never sent. That detail froze me. I stared at the paper so long I started to feel like it was staring back. I shut down my laptop, turned off my phone, even unplugged my smart speaker. For the first time, I felt exposed. Like my apartment wasn't a private space anymore, like I wasn't alone. I went to the police that afternoon. The officer I spoke to raised an eyebrow but nodded through my story. When I showed him the letters, he looked uncomfortable. Said they'd file a report, but I could tell he didn't really think it was serious. He asked if I had enemies, or if I was trying to get attention. The words weren't accusatory, but his tone made me feel like a paranoid freak. I left the station feeling worse than when I arrived. Not only was someone watching me, but no one believed me. A week later, the letters escalated. This one didn't mention anything digital. Instead, it described where I had lunch the day before. Down, to the booth number in the corner of the sandwich shop near campus. It mentioned the exact time I paid, what I ordered, and even that I spilled mustard on my hoodie sleeve. That detail hadn't even registered with me until I checked. There was a faint yellow stain, right where the letter said. I stood frozen, in my apartment, reading the paragraph over and over again, the paper trembling in my hands. That's when the paranoia started to sink in. I began scanning faces in crowds, checking reflections in windows, flinching at footsteps behind me. I stopped going to my favorite coffee shop after I found a napkin left on my usual table, with a simple smiley face drawn in red ink. I hadn't told anyone about the letters, not my friends, not even my roommate who was rarely home anyway. I figured the fewer people who knew, the safer I'd be. But it didn't matter. Whoever was behind this already knew everything. The next letter arrived the night before my evening computer science class. It was waiting for me on my desk when I got home, inside my locked apartment. That stopped me cold. I checked the door. The lock was untouched. The windows were shut, no signs of entry. I live on the 6th floor. There's no fire escape. Nothing. But the letter was there, centered perfectly on my desk chair. It read, "Tomorrow night, after class, you will walk home alone. You will meet a man who knows everything about you." That was it. No threats, no demands, just that single haunting line. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the corner of my room with a baseball bat and every light on, watching shadows shift across the walls. I told myself not to go to class the next day, but skipping it would mean they'd won. Or worse, that they'd still come find me. So I went. I stayed alert the whole time, heart hammering through the lecture. I didn't hear a word the professor said. I left as soon as it ended, walking fast, checking every reflection, every pair of footsteps that fell too close behind mine. About halfway home, I noticed a man on the opposite sidewalk, walking in sync with me. Not behind, not ahead, just parallel. His head was down, hands in his coat pockets, moving with this weird, deliberate calm. I crossed the street at the next light. So did he. I stopped in front of a closed bookstore, pretending to check my phone. He stopped too, right across from me. And that's when he looked up. His face was unremarkable, plain, like someone you'd forget after passing on the street, but his eyes didn't blink. They just locked onto mine like he was reading something behind them. I turned and ran. I didn't wait for a signal or check for cars. I just sprinted across the street and kept going until I reached my building. I slammed the door behind me and rode the elevator up in silence, chest heaving, every muscle tense. When I reached my apartment, I locked the door, then locked it again, then again, 3 times. I pressed my back against it and slid down to the floor, the echo of those words from the letter pounding in my head. You will meet a man who knows everything about you. That wasn't a prediction. It was a promise. The last letter came the next morning. It was taped to the inside of my fridge door. I had barely opened it when the paper fluttered out, landing face up on the floor. No envelope, no fanfare. Just one sentence, printed in the same neat mechanical font. You ran last night. That was wise. I stood there, barefoot on the cold tile, fridge still open, light humming behind me. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or horrified. I hadn't told a soul about what happened. I hadn't written it down, hadn't typed it, hadn't said a word out loud, and yet, they knew. It's been 3 days, no more letters, no strange men in coats, but I still flinch every time my phone lights up. I still double-check every window, every shadow. My webcam stays covered. My devices are off more than on. And sometimes when I pass by the mirror at night, I feel like there's a delay, like my reflection takes half a second too long to follow me. Maybe just paranoid. Maybe they're done with me, or maybe They're just watching to see what I do next. If anyone out there has gone through something like this, anything, please tell me I'm not alone. The following events are based on a true story. Names and details have been altered to protect the identities of those involved. But the horror remains untouched. Watch at your own risk. Story 11. I used to think I was hard to rattle. Working nights at a bar in South Beach, you get used to weirdos. Drunks, stalkers, even the occasional celebrity meltdown. Nothing really got under my skin. But last week I found a letter in my locker at work. No envelope, just folded paper. Written in shaky blue ink. It listed every table I served the night before. Even the exact time I laughed at a customer's joke. 9:47 p.m. You chuckled at the woman in red after she said her husband couldn't handle tequila. I don't wear a name tag, and I'd never seen that handwriting before. I laughed it off at first, showed it to my coworker Carla, and joked that she was finally confessing her crush. She rolled her eyes and said I wasn't that interesting. Still, I figured someone was just messing with me. Maybe a regular with too much time on their hands. But then came the second letter. This one mentioned where I went after work. You stayed at Murphy's until 2:16 a.m. You left alone. You walked home. That stopped me cold. I don't post my whereabouts online, and I didn't see anyone following me that night. At least, I thought I didn't. After that, I started checking my surroundings more carefully. Every time I stepped out of Murphy's or took my usual path down Collins Avenue, I scanned the sidewalks, the parked cars, even reflections in storefront windows. Nothing. Just the usual late-night crowd, tourists stumbling back to their hotels, couples fighting in whispers. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. It was like the air itself had changed. Thicker, heavier, like something was waiting for me to let my guard down. The third letter came 3 days later, slipped into the back pocket of my apron while I was bartending. That one didn't mention the bar at all. It described the beach. My beach. The spot I go to clear my head after a long shift, tucked behind a lifeguard tower where I can barely hear the city. It even mentioned the kind of beer I bring with me. 2 Modelo cans, still cold. That detail hit me hard. I don't go there with anyone. I never told anyone about that place. It's where I go to be alone. After that, I stopped going to the beach. I even started taking different routes home, mixing up my routine, staying at Murphy's longer just to be around other people. But the letters didn't stop. They just got closer, more precise. One of them described the way I tapped my fingers on the counter during a slow shift. Another one said, "You keep checking over your shoulder now, smart." That one was typed, not handwritten, and that somehow made it worse. Colder, like whoever this was had moved past pretending to be a creep. They wanted me to know they were evolving. I went to the police. Of course I did. I brought the letters, told them everything. The officer behind the glass barely looked up from his computer, said unless there was a direct threat or physical harm, there wasn't much they could do. Probably just someone with a crush, he said. I almost laughed. There was nothing romantic about this. It was surgical, deliberate. Someone was studying me, tracking me, and the last line in the most recent letter burned itself into my brain like a brand. "I'll see you at the beach tonight." I told myself I wasn't going, that I'd ignore it, go straight home, lock the doors, and sleep with the lights on if I had to. But around midnight, something pulled me out the door. Not curiosity, compulsion. Like I had to know if someone would actually be there. Like not going would somehow be worse. I walked the 10 blocks to the beach with my hood up, my hands jammed deep into my pockets. The streets were almost empty. The breeze carried that heavy ocean scent, but I barely noticed it. My ears were tuned to every footstep, every flicker of movement in the shadows. The beach was nearly deserted, except for a couple making out by the dunes and a jogger in the distance. I headed for the lifeguard tower, my spot. The sand was cool under my sneakers, soft and slightly damp. I sat down where I usually do, trying to act casual, even though my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might give me away. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Not from the boardwalk, from behind the tower, slow, deliberate. Sand shifting under careful weight. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. The footsteps stopped just out of sight. I held my breath, every nerve in my body straining for some clue, breathing, movement, anything. But there was nothing. Just the sound of the waves and my own pulse screaming in my ears. I finally stood up, slow and careful, and turned around. No one, just the shadow of the tower stretching out behind me in smooth, undisturbed sand. I walked around the structure, looked underneath it, even checked the shoreline in both directions. Nothing. But as I stepped back toward my spot, I noticed something half buried near where I'd been sitting. It was a photo, printed on glossy paper, a little crumpled at the edges. It showed me sitting exactly where I had been just minutes earlier, same clothes, same posture, head turned slightly toward the ocean. I flipped it over. On the back, written in that same shaky blue ink, "Told you I'd see you." I dropped it like it burned me. My legs were moving before I realized I'd even decided to run. I didn't stop until I was inside my apartment with every lock bolted and the curtains drawn. But even there, I didn't feel safe, because now I knew it wasn't just someone watching. It was someone close enough to touch. That was 3 nights ago. I haven't gone back to the beach since, haven't gone back to work either. I told my boss I needed some time off, and thankfully he didn't ask too many questions. But I still hear things. Footsteps in the hallway outside my apartment, the faint sound of paper sliding under my door. I check every time. Nothing's ever there. But this morning my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. No words. Just a photo of my apartment building, taken from across the street, taken today. I hadn't even left my bed yet. I've started keeping a knife under my pillow. It doesn't make me feel any safer, but it's something. Some nights I think I see movement outside my window, just barely, like someone ducking out of sight. I don't know what they want. I don't know if they're playing some kind of game or if this is just the beginning. But if you live in South Beach and someone starts leaving you letters, burn them. And if you see someone watching you from a distance, don't wait, run. Because by the time you realize they're there, they already know where you're going next. Story 12. I used to feel safe here. That's the worst part. Our apartment is on the top floor of a luxury high-rise in San Francisco, just 3 blocks from the Golden Gate. Floor-to-ceiling windows, concierge service, a view that could make anyone forget the world is rotting just beneath the surface. We worked hard for this life, Mark in fintech, me in digital marketing. And for the first time, it felt like we were living the kind of life other people envied. Till the first letter arrived, it was a cream-colored envelope, no return address, placed neatly in our mailbox. Inside was a single sheet of paper typed, no signature. It listed the exact time Mark left for work that Monday, 7:48 a.m., and the route he took down Lombard Street to the marina. It noted that I ordered my usual almond milk latte from the cafe on Chestnut at 8:15 a.m., and that I sat by the window for 17 minutes. "You look tired," it read, almost kindly. We laughed about it at first. Mark said it was probably a weird prank, maybe someone in the building. I agreed, but deep down, I didn't laugh. The second letter came 2 days later. This time it described what we had for dinner, Thai takeout from the place on Polk Street. It mentioned how Mark spilled curry on his shirt and cursed under his breath. That was unsettling. But what chilled me was the part about our gym session earlier that day. It mentioned how I paused for a moment on the treadmill to fix my ponytail, and how Mark had stared blankly at the mirror for a solid minute before snapping out of it. "You two are such creatures of habit," it ended. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the apartment made me flinch. We started keeping the blinds closed even during the day. The third letter shattered any remaining illusion that this was just some sick joke. It referenced the argument Mark and I had last Tuesday night, the one where we'd both raised our voices, saying things we instantly regretted. The letter quoted us, word for word, things we said in the privacy of our bedroom. "Funny how love can turn sour over the smallest things," it read. I felt sick. No one else could have heard us. We hadn't told anyone. That's when Mark finally stopped pretending it wasn't serious. We contacted the building manager, asked about the mailroom, the security footage. Nothing, no strange activity, no unfamiliar faces, just the letters, arriving like clockwork. We installed security cameras the next day. 2 in the living room, 1 pointed at the front door, another covering the hallway. Mark insisted on setting up alerts to our phones. We even changed the locks, not because there was any sign of a break-in, but because we needed to do something. For a while, there was silence. No letters, no strange observations. Just the quiet hum of unease that had now woven itself into our everyday lives. But deep down, I think we both knew it wasn't over. The silence broke on a Saturday morning. We found the 4th letter slipped under our door. That was new. It described in excruciating detail how we had driven to Sausalito the previous weekend, which parking lot we used, where we sat for lunch, and the fact that I had cried briefly while we waited for dessert. Something even Mark hadn't noticed. "You're very good at hiding things," it said. The cameras hadn't picked up anything. We reviewed the footage a dozen times. No one had come near the door, not once. And yet, the letter was there. After that, we stopped going out unless we absolutely had to. I started working remotely again, and Mark rearranged his meetings to stay home more often. But the letters kept coming. Shorter now. Colder. "Nice shirt today." The coffee was too bitter, wasn't it? "You should close the window before it rains." Always typed, always anonymous. One arrived while we were both in the kitchen. No knock, no sound. Just the white envelope suddenly there on the floor, as if the air itself had spat it out. That was the first night we slept with the lights on. We called the police, of course. They took the letters, dusted for prints. Nothing. No leads. They suggested it might be someone with access to our building, maybe even a neighbor. The idea that it could be someone we passed in the elevator, someone who smiled at us in the lobby. It made me feel like my skin didn't fit right anymore. The officers left with polite reassurances, but their eyes said it all. They didn't believe us. Or worse, they did, and they knew they couldn't help. We started covering the mirrors. At night. I don't know why, it just felt like the right thing to do. Like maybe, if we couldn't see out, nothing could see in. Mark stopped sleeping altogether. He'd sit on the couch with the lights off, just listening. One night, I woke up to find him standing by the front door, holding a kitchen knife. "I heard breathing," he whispered. But when I asked where it came from, he just shook his head. That's when I realized. It didn't matter where. It was the fact that he'd heard it at all. The final letter came on a Tuesday. No envelope this time. Just a folded sheet of paper resting on the center of our coffee table. Neither of us had left the apartment that day. We had checked the locks, watched the cameras, kept every window shut. And still, there it was. The message was only 1 line long. "I'll be in your living room when you return." My vision tunneled. Mark just stood there holding the letter like it might bite him. We checked every room, every corner, every closet. Nothing. The footage showed no one entering. No one at all. We didn't come back for 2 days. Stayed at a hotel downtown. Neither of us spoke much. We just lay there in bed, staring at the ceiling, jumping at every hallway sound. When we finally returned, everything was exactly as we left it. No new letters, no signs of forced entry. But something felt off. The throw pillows on the couch weren't in the right order. One of my sweaters was draped over the armrest. I hadn't left it there. And in the bathroom, the mirror we had covered was uncovered. The cloth was folded neatly on the sink like someone had wanted us to look at ourselves. We moved out that weekend. Broke the lease, didn't care about the penalties. The building manager didn't ask questions. Maybe we weren't the first. We left the cameras running for a few days after, just in case. On the last recording from the living room cam, there's a 5-second clip that neither of us can explain. It's just static at first. Then a frame flickers in, too fast to catch unless you pause it. A figure, standing by the window, not moving, just watching. And then it's gone. We never saw another letter, but sometimes late at night I still check the mirror, just in case something is watching back. Story 13. I found the first letter, tucked under my door on a Tuesday morning, neatly folded, no envelope, just a single sheet of printer paper with handwriting too precise to feel natural. It read, "You spilled coffee on your black slacks yesterday. No one noticed, but you changed anyway." That was true. I had changed before my shift at Bellagio after a clumsy moment at Starbucks. At the time, I laughed it off. Thought maybe a neighbor saw me and decided to be weird about it. But something about the way it was written, like a statement, not a tease, stuck with me all day. I'm Nicole, by the way. I've been a dealer in Vegas for almost 8 years. Most people don't know how grueling the job really is. Late nights, fake smiles, cameras everywhere. My apartment is just off. The Strip, close enough to walk when traffic's hell, but far enough to pretend I don't live inside the madness. Normally, I keep to myself. Work, home, gym, sleep, that's it. But after the third letter showed up, this time placed inside my mailbox, even though I never gave anyone a key, I stopped feeling alone, and not in the good way. The third letter didn't just mention something I did. It described something I said. You told Maria that you're afraid of ending up like Donna, 43, still working the floor, smiling until your cheeks cramp. That conversation happened during a 5-minute break behind the staff lounge, whispered over the rim of a Diet Coke. No one else was there. Not unless someone was listening. That's when the unease started crawling under my skin. Because now, wasn't funny. It was intimate, it was invasive. I asked Maria if she told anyone. She swore she hadn't. I believed her. By the 5th letter, I stopped sleeping properly. Every creak in my apartment felt calculated. I started keeping my blinds closed, triple-checking the locks before bed. The letter came on a Friday, a short one this time. Tonight you will take the late shift and you'll see someone who shouldn't be there. My schedule had just changed last minute due to a coworker calling out sick. Only a few people do. I read that sentence over and over again until the words stopped making sense. My chest felt tight. I told myself it was just a guess, a coincidence. But that night, around 2:13 a.m., I saw him. Tall, still, standing alone in the casino lobby, not gambling, not moving. Just waiting. I tried to pretend he was just another tourist. Maybe waiting for someone, maybe drunk or spaced out. But something was off. His suit was too clean, not expensive, just untouched like it had been placed on him, not worn, and his eyes never blinked. I mean that literally. I stood behind the roulette table, pretending to focus on the chips and bets, but my peripheral vision was locked on him. 15 minutes passed. He didn't move. Then, without warning, he turned and walked past me. Not toward an exit, not toward the elevators, just past me, like he knew I was watching. I didn't sleep when I got home. I sat on the couch with all the lights on, clutching the next morning's mail like it might explode. And there it was. Another letter slipped between junk ads and bills. You watched him for 15 minutes, you counted. You were wrong. It was 17. My hands started shaking. My mouth went dry. I wanted to run, to call the cops, to scream. But scream what? That someone was predicting my shifts and quoting my thoughts? That a man who looked like a mannequin had passed by me in a place filled with 1,000 cameras, but no one else noticed? I called out sick that night. And the night after that. The casino. Called on Monday asking if I was okay, and I lied. I said I had the flu. I almost wished I did. At least that would have made sense. But the letters didn't stop. The next one came taped to the inside of my bathroom mirror. I have no idea how. It got there. I live alone, my door was locked, and there were no signs of a break-in. It simply said, "You keep all your lights on now. It doesn't help." That was it. No greeting, no signature. Just the observation, cold and accurate. I started leaving the TV on for noise. I stopped using the mirror at night. By Wednesday, I was on edge constantly. I checked every closet before bed. I started sleeping with a knife under my pillow, even though I knew it wouldn't do anything. Fear changes the way you think. It eats away at reason. The following evening, I forced myself to go back to work. I needed the normalcy. Or maybe, I wanted to prove to myself that it was all in my head. The moment I walked through the staff entrance, I saw something that shattered that hope. A single playing card had been pinned to my locker. The Queen of Hearts. Nothing else. But when I reached out to touch it, I felt a smear of something sticky on the back. Blood, dry, but definitely blood. I didn't tell anyone. What would I say? Hey, someone left a bloody playing card on my locker and I think they're watching me through the walls? I peeled it off with a tissue, wrapped it in a plastic bag, and stuffed it into my purse, like it was radioactive. The rest of my shift blurred by. I miscounted chips, forgot payouts, and smiled so hard my jaw ached. The only thing I remember clearly is the figure. He was back. This time seated at a slot machine, hands resting on his knees, eyes never leaving mine. He didn't even pretend to play. Just watched. When I blinked, he was gone. Not walked away. Gone. I asked the security guy on break if he'd seen a tall man in a dark suit hanging around the north side of the lobby. He just shrugged. They're all tall in suits, hun. I didn't push it, I already knew what I'd find. And sure enough, when I got home, the next letter was waiting on my kitchen table. I hadn't even locked the door behind me yet. He doesn't like to be seen for too long. You're lucky tonight. My legs nearly gave out. I sank to the floor and stared at those words until the letters bled together. I started to wonder if this was how madness began, not in screams or hallucinations, but in quiet certainty that something is horribly wrong and no one else can see it. I called my landlord, asked if anyone had access to my unit. He sounded annoyed, said no one had been inside, and maybe I should get some rest. That night, I placed my phone on record and left it on the counter while I slept. In the morning, I listened. Nothing for the first 3 hours. Then, at 3:41 a.m., I heard it. A chair dragging, soft footsteps, and a voice barely above a whisper directly into the microphone. She's not ready yet. I've stopped working. I've stopped going outside. I taped all the vents shut and sealed every window. Still, I woke up today to another letter. This one slipped beneath my pillow. I hadn't even moved all night. I'm sure of it. The message was only 2 words, almost there. I don't know what that means, I don't want to know. But if you're reading this and you work late nights, especially alone, pay attention to who's watching. Pay attention to what they shouldn't know. And if you ever get a letter that knows too much, burn it. Don't open it. Don't give them a name. Story 14. I never used to look over my shoulder. Not once. Our street in Austin was the kind where kids played barefoot until dusk and neighbors waved like they meant it. I walked my son, Caleb, to school every morning, then stopped by the same cafe for my iced coffee, said hi to the same barista, and drove the same route to work, humming to the same sad 2000s playlist. Life was repetitive, but comforting in its predictability. Until the letter came. It was a plain white envelope with no return address, tucked neatly under my windshield wiper. I assumed it was a flyer or maybe some lost pet ad. I opened it at the red light, just for something to... It wasn't a flyer. It wasn't even typed. The handwriting was delicate, slanted, almost too perfect. 2 eggs over easy. Toast with too much butter again. Caleb likes the crusts on now, stop cutting them off. My mouth went dry. I had made that exact breakfast that morning. The toast was a little burnt, just how I like it. And I had smiled. When Caleb asked for his crusts, no one was in the kitchen with us. I checked, twice. I tried to tell myself it was a prank, maybe a friend playing a sick joke. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been watching us, someone close, closer than I could have imagined. The second letter came 2 days later. This time, it was slipped inside my mailbox, placed between junk mail and a water bill. You took the longer route to work today. You paused at the intersection on 7th and Maple for exactly 17 seconds, thinking about whether you locked the back door. You didn't. My stomach dropped. I had stopped there. I had questioned the lock. The words felt like a finger tracing the inside of my thoughts. I rushed home and found the back door slightly ajar. Nothing was missing, nothing out of place. But I still searched every closet, every drawer, every shadow. By the time the fourth letter came, I had stopped sleeping properly. I kept all the lights on in the house and triple-checked every window before bed. But still, I couldn't stop the letters. Tell Danielle you're not ready to quit. You'll regret it. That one arrived minutes before my lunch meeting with my friend Danielle, where I had planned to finally admit I was done with the stress, done with the office politics. I didn't tell her. I couldn't. My voice caught in my throat as I kept scanning the cafe for anyone watching me. The letter had been right again. Somehow it knew what I hadn't even said out loud yet. I started carrying the letters in my purse, as if having them close might help me understand them. The sixth one arrived folded inside Caleb's homework folder. That shook me more than any of the others. He got question 5 wrong. He was distracted by the tapping outside. I hadn't even looked at his homework yet. When I flipped to question 5, it was circled in red. Wrong. Caleb had mentioned hearing tapping the night before, said it sounded like someone flicking their fingernail against his window. I told him it was just branches. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the hallway with the lights off, waiting to hear it for myself. I contacted the school the next morning. I didn't tell them everything, just that I thought someone might be watching our house. They said they'd increase patrols during dismissal. I nodded and thanked them, pretending I believed it would help. But then came the letter that changed everything. It was taped to my front door, and my hands trembled as I pulled it off. Today, at 3:42 p.m., Caleb will be in danger. He'll be walking home just like always. But someone else will be watching too. Don't be late. I didn't read it twice. I grabbed my keys and ran. I arrived at the school 10 minutes early. The sun was sharp in that way it gets in the late afternoon, casting long shadows across the pavement. I stood near the front gate, scanning every face, every car that passed. 3:42 was burned into my brain. I checked the time over and over, my pulse quickening with each minute. The final bell rang, and kids began to trickle out in clusters, laughing, yelling, carefree. But Caleb wasn't among them. I moved closer, my voice shaky as I asked a teacher if she'd seen him. Her brow furrowed. She checked the clipboard. Then her face changed. He was signed out early, she said, by his father. My ex-husband lives in Seattle. He hadn't been in Texas in over a year. I felt the air disappear from my lungs. That's not possible, I said, too loudly, my voice cracking. He doesn't live here. The teacher looked uneasy now, starting to realize something was wrong. She described the man who had come for Caleb. Brown jacket, baseball cap, sunglasses, nondescript, forgettable. And Caleb had gone with him without hesitation. I didn't wait for more. I ran to my car and started calling everyone I could think of. His father, neighbors, even 911. But I already knew what they'd say. There were no witnesses, no footage. No one saw a thing. Back at home, I tore the place apart looking for anything, any clue, any trace. I opened drawers I hadn't touched in months, dumped out boxes, crawled under beds. And that's when I saw it. Another envelope tucked neatly inside Caleb's sock drawer, as if it had always been there. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly ripped it. You were late. He's already gone, but don't worry, you'll see him again sooner than you think. I fell to the floor. My body couldn't decide whether to scream or vomit. How long had they been inside my house? How long? Had they known I would fail? The police were kind at first. They filed the report, took my statements, asked about custody issues. When I mentioned the letters, their expressions changed. They asked to see them, but I'd already shredded the first few in panic. The rest, they photographed, bagged, logged. Days passed. Then a week. No leads, no suspects. They started asking different kinds of questions. About my mental health, about stress, medication, sleep. I could see it in their eyes. They didn't believe me anymore. But the letters hadn't stopped. One arrived the night after the detectives left. You talk too much. Be careful who you trust. I haven't left the house in 3 days. I sleep with the hallway light on and a kitchen knife under my pillow. The cops stopped checking in. My friends have stopped calling. I think even Danielle has given up. I keep replaying every detail of that day, what I missed, what I could have done differently. But the newest letter changed everything again. It was already inside when I woke up, resting on my nightstand like it had always belonged there. He misses you. He keeps asking why you didn't come sooner. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the wall for hours, waiting for it to blink. Now I leave the door unlocked. Not out of carelessness, but because I think it's already too late. Whoever they are, they're still watching, still listening. Maybe even waiting for me to understand something I haven't yet. Every sound feels rehearsed, every silence deliberate. And sometimes just before I fall asleep, I hear footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate. They always stop just outside my door. If you've read this far, tell me something. Do you think I'm crazy, or has someone been watching you too? Story 15. I used to leave my window open at night. Something about the sounds of the city. Horns echoing off brick, footsteps on wet pavement. The occasional drunken laughter helped me write. There was a rhythm in the chaos. But now, that window stays shut, locked, sealed. Because ever since, the letters started showing up, the sounds don't feel like background noise anymore. They feel like someone waiting, listening. It began about 3 weeks ago, folded neatly between the frets of my Stratocaster. Just a small sheet of paper with no name, no return address, only the words, "You killed it at Mercury Lounge." The new song, "About Your Dad," that hit deep. No one knew the song was about my dad, not even my bandmates. I remember laughing it off, assuming it was some psychic fan or an ex I'd forgotten. But the next letter came the following night, and then the night after that. Each one knew more, felt closer. By the 5th letter, I couldn't laugh it off anymore. It described a conversation I'd had just hours earlier with Matt, our drummer, backstage at the bitter end. We'd been alone. No audience, no open mics, just us killing time, talking about moving out of the city. Maybe trying LA for a while. The letter quoted Matt's exact words. "New York's starting to rot, man. You feel it too, right?" That was when the nausea hit me. Whoever was writing these, they weren't guessing. They were there. I started looking for cameras. Behind the amps, in the practice space, even in my apartment. I swept for hidden mics. Nothing. I stopped inviting people over. I started unplugging my Alexa, covering the webcam on my laptop, even leaving my phone in the bathroom while I wrote. But the letters kept coming. They always arrived when I was out, folded in half, tucked somewhere intimate, inside my jacket pocket, under my coffee mug, once even in my lyric notebook. The paper always smelled faintly of metal and something sweet like artificial cherry. I told myself it had to be someone close. Maybe Jules, our bassist, she was always a bit of a prankster. Or maybe Devin, our sound guy. He had access to everything and barely said a word. But when I brought it up casually, tested the waters, their reactions didn't match. Jules laughed like I was joking. Devin just blinked at me, like I'd asked him if the sky was real. No smirk, no denial, just blank. I think that scared me more than if he'd confessed. Then came the letter with the prediction. No preamble, no compliment, no mention of songs or memories. Just a single line, typed instead of handwritten. "Tonight, you will play your last song. After that, you won't have the chance to sing again." I stared at it so long, the words started to blur. I wasn't even scheduled to play that night, but 20 minutes later, Jules texted me. One of the openers at Rockwood had dropped out. Did we want to fill the spot? I should have said no. I should have said I was sick. But instead, I said yes. Rockwood Music Hall was half empty that night, but the lights were blinding as ever. As we played through our set, I kept scanning the crowd, searching for any face that lingered too long, any movement that didn't belong. But everyone looked normal, bored, buzzed, scrolling through their phones. Still, I couldn't shake the weight of that letter. My voice cracked during the second song. I forgot the chords on the fourth. On the last one, my fingers trembled so hard I nearly dropped the pick. The room felt too quiet, like it was holding its breath. When the final chord rang out, nothing happened. No explosion, no blackout, no shadow stepping onto the stage. I almost laughed. I thought maybe I'd won, that it had been some sick joke all along. The relief was sharp and stupid. I packed up fast, waved off Jules, and got home around midnight. But when I unlocked the door, something was wrong. The apartment was clean. Too clean. My cereal box was upright, not where I'd left it sideways. My worn hoodie was folded neatly on the chair. And on my pillow was a new letter. This one wasn't typed. It was handwritten again, same narrow strokes, same off-center slant. But the paper was damp, like someone had held it in their mouth. The message was shorter than usual. You didn't sing your last song. Not yet. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat on the floor, back against the bedroom door, guitar across my lap like a shield. Every creak of the building made me flinch. At 3:14 a.m., the hallway light outside my apartment flickered off, then on again. 3 times. No wind, no footsteps. Just silence. The next morning, I walked to the bodega and asked the owner to check the security footage from the night before. He gave me a look, somewhere between confused and annoyed, but humored me. We watched together. I saw myself walk past his store around 11:57 p.m. I looked tired, distracted, but behind me, maybe 10 feet back, there was someone else. Not fully visible, just the edge of a shoulder, half a face. Whoever it was, they stopped when I did, turned when I turned, and when I entered my building, they waited outside, watching. I don't go out much anymore. I canceled the next few gigs. I told the band I needed a break to write, but that was a lie. I haven't touched my guitar in days. Every time I try, I feel like I'm being watched. Not in the metaphorical way, I mean it literally. I've started catching things in the corner of my eye, movements that vanish the moment I turn my head, a reflection in a window that doesn't match mine, and the letters, they've stopped coming. But that somehow feels worse. Last night I found a single word scratched into the inside of my bathroom mirror. Sing. I hadn't sung a note since that night at Rockwood. I stood there staring at it, my reflection warping behind the fogged glass. Then I heard a soft humming coming from the living room. My melody, the one I never recorded, the one I only ever played alone. I wasn't alone. I know that now. And if anyone out there has experienced something like this, please, say something, before it's your song they decide to end.